on the wall because he was one of the first visitors of our press club in 1998. So it's really a pleasure for me to welcome this meeting tonight and to welcome such high-level speakers. And I wish to thank Ambassador Pedro Pedroso for taking the initiative of this meeting and giving us the opportunity to meet tonight. I don't wish to be longer because we have to give the floor to our guests. We just have to apologize the absence of Mr. Jean Ziegler because he could not apply this meeting, but we have prominent speakers with Mrs. Ambassador of South Africa and Mr. Ambassador of Venezuela, who will talk about their experience and their thoughts about, the Cuban Revolution and former President Castro. So before to give the floor to Ambassador Pedroso, I would like to ask our guests to sign our golden book. Just a signature. Okay, now I will give the floor to Mr. Ambassador of Cuba, Mr. Pedro Pedroso, please. Just push the button. Don't slide. Just push the button when you speak.
Thank you very much, Guy. Excellencies, my fellow ambassadors, distinguished colleagues and friends, good evening. I thank you all for your presence here today, in particular the panelists, Her Excellency Ambassador Diseko, Permanent Representative of South Africa, His Excellency Ambassador Valero, Permanent Representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, and Mr. Guy Mettan, Executive Director of the Geneva Press Club. I also appreciate the traditional hospitality of La Pastoral. Before proceeding, I would also like to present the apologies of Mr. Jean Ziegler, who was supposed to be here with us. He suffered an accident and prevented him to be here. We wish him quick recovery. 3 years ago, the news of the physical disappearance of the historical leader of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro Ruz, was known. We met today to pay tribute to his memory and to reflect on his legacy in these 60 years of a struggle to build a better and more dignified society. Fidel's lessons and ideas are more present today than ever. He anticipated the very serious challenges and risks that the survival of the human species confronts today. The aggressive nature of U.S. imperialism, the dangers of the devastating nuclear war, the effects of climate change, the unsustainable production and consumption pattern of rich societies, and the abyss that separates them from the poorest are just some of the main threats that he foresaw and denounced. To those challenges, he dedicated a large part of his political life after the triumph of the Cuban Revolution. Regarding what Fidel did in our country, the story is well known. Although mutual enemies are determined to undermine it and to do everything possible to continue reinforcing the economic, commercial, and financial blockade on Cuba, threatening us, sabotaging our economic development, and trying to hinder Cuba's relationship with the world. Fidel led a revolution of the people and for the people, and he made it to succeed despite all the obstacles, in particular, the opposition and all actions to overthrow it by the most powerful enemy, the United States. Fidel chose that there is no impossible dream for the people willing to fight for their sovereignty and for their homeland. He also chose that all enemies can be defeated when there is unity and firmness of principles. Cuba is a country without significant natural resources, but Fidel also chose that the main resource of a country is its people, its intelligence, its values. To the development of those values, he also dedicated his life. Fidel placed our small island on the political world map. Since 1959, Cuba has provided support and cooperation to everyone who has needed. We learn from him that solidarity is to share what we have and not what is left over. Because, as Jose Marti said, homeland is humanity. Fidel was one of the main defenders of multilateralism and of the central role of the United Nations in maintaining a peace based on development and equality between all human beings and all countries of the world. Fidel was fundamental to the unity of the countries of the South, particularly the non-aligned movement, and a true promoter of the Latin America and Caribbean unity. He was a defender of the cause of the poor and voiceless in the multilateral arena. But one of Fidel's most important legacy is his example. The example of making a revolution in the backyard of the US for which they cannot forgive us, nor do we want their forgiveness. As Fidel said, if the imperialists can stand a socialist Cuba 90 miles off their coast, let them be the ones who moved. Excellencies, dear friends, today we celebrate one more anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, probably the most manipulated document in the history of mankind. In these dramatic moments of history, we have to rescue the original sense of human rights and save the international mechanisms that must defend them from politicization and manipulation. We Cubans take pride in having Fidel its main defender and promoter. No one did more than him in Cuba for its true implementation and defense. Not only the civil and political rights of an entire people, but also economic, social, and cultural and collective rights. In the endless battle to conquer all justice and dignity of all human beings, Fidel's example and ideas will always accompany us. Dear friends, colleagues, and guests, with these remarks, I'm very pleased and honored to open the panel, and I'm also pleased to give the floor to Her Excellency Ambassador Nosipho Msakato Diseko of South Africa. Ambassador Diseko represents the heroic struggles of a people. She has been alongside many heroes of the struggle against apartheid and joined the Congress Alliance at a very young age. She had the privilege of working alongside the late President Nelson Mandela. Ambassador Diseko is a freedom fighter and a human rights activist, as well as a firm defender of multilateralism. We are proud to call her a close friend of Cuba. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Just push the button.
Thank you, Ambassador Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, compatriots, comrades and friends, and to you, dear Pedro, and my Cuban brothers and sisters. It's a great pleasure and honor for me to be here tonight to be part of this commemoration of our hero, as it were, in South Africa. Fidel Castro was a hero 3 years after he passed away. As the ambassador says, I had the honor of working with Nelson Mandela. I remember when Fidel Castro came to South Africa in 1998 for the summit of the non-aligned movement, everything ground to a halt. That's the kind of impact that he had. The nation ground to a halt in homage and appreciation of who he was. I watched young people, young boys as old as 9, asking each other, have you seen him, have you seen him? Was he wearing his cap? How long is his beard? What did he say to the president? Did he say, comrade, comrade, a luta continua? These are children who should have been playing cowboys, but they were gripped by the immensity of the personality that had come to South Africa. This was really very extraordinary. Those children have grown now, but the impact that he has on South Africa, the connection that we have to date, you only have to mention the name Fidel Castro, everything grinds to a halt. Was he smoking a cigar? And they would be standing in corner and trying to emulate Castro. And because of how we knew him and what he had become to us, simply put, to South Africans, he was a giant. He was the ultimate freedom fighter and human rights fighter, because before you can defend human rights, you have to fight to claim to get them. And whenever there were situations where people had been robbed of their human rights and denied of their human rights and had no basis for defending them, you would find a contribution made by Castro. His indomitable spirit, charisma, and lifelong commitment to the downtrodden and the oppressed, despite being born into a wealthy family, bear testimony to this greatness that we're talking about. His grasp of the world, his ability to read the global pulse and anticipate nuances and inflections with precision, and his strategic prowess led Nelson Mandela to state in 1991 on his visit to Cuba after being released from prison that the Cuban internationalists had made a contribution to African independence, freedom, and justice unparalleled for its principled and selfless character, and dare I say, its effectiveness. The Cubans were very effective on the ground. A factor that powers that even possessed nuclear weapons could never, ever even begin to have. The ability of the Cubans to weave themselves into communities, understand them, and work with them as partners, and give a sense of ownership to the processes as they guide them to reach their destination is an incredible factor. This Mandela learned from Cuba and would say, we too, like him, want to control our own destiny. When Africa was the battleground between competing ideologies, caught in the middle of the Cold War, Cuba was a friend of the liberation movements and never even once sought to dictate what type of post-colonial governance we should have, but engaged with all of us as partners. Whereas many claim to know Nelson Mandela in Western capitals today, it was Castro who sent soldiers, doctors and teachers when our newly liberated societies were at their most vulnerable, to ensure that we defend our newly gained freedoms. For us in South Africa, it was Castro who gave practical guidance on what we should do at a time when political allies were few and far in between. It was Castro's Cuba that gave our young exiles a home, beds, food, and filled their hungry stomachs, and gave them education, and above all, gave them hope at a time when Cuba was itself blockaded and sanctioned. You have to remember that it seemed inconceivable that apartheid could be defeated, yet Castro believed this was a possibility in our lifetime. And we as young people would say, oh, he's dreaming, it'll never be accomplished. And you're talking about a nuclear weapon state. We forget that South Africa was a nuclear weapon state. He fundamentally believed that we would triumph over apartheid. Mandela recalls that Cuba was the first country to come to our aid without any questions. So let me try and trace this influence, this remarkable contribution to the shaping of a continent, and give you a sense of how far we've come with him as a friend. Soon after the overthrow of the Batista regime, I think the young Marxist and communist revolutionaries grouped around Fidel and Raul Castro and Che Guevara, they set their sights on the continent to help bring about its decolonization. And you have to wonder why people so far away from the continent, so far away, would preoccupy themselves with the plight of people that Western countries had deemed as subspecies. How is it that people far across continents saw our humanity, and not only did they see our humanity, but they were willing to spare no effort in having that humanity affirmed, as it were, from afar. And this is really remarkable. You see, from 1961 until Fidel left office, that Cuba is forever present in the drive for development and colonialism. When Tanzania strives to find a model that empowers people by ensuring that the resources are shared, Cuba is there to assist, whereas the mere idea of people sharing is threatening to the prevailing powers who seek to punish Tanzania and ensure that Tanzanian socialism stands no chance at all, that it stands no chance at all. And Castro's belief in the continent was unwavering. In particular, that the continent was capable of charting its future and managing its own affairs and shaping its own policy. This is clear in the distinctive foreign policy of Cuba from its independence, which is indeed actually very distinctive from the foreign policy of the Soviet Union, and is an independent foreign policy that is based on a particular understanding of the continent, and it places Africa at the center. As a result of this, Cuba hosted the Tricontinental Conference in 1966 that brought together national liberation movements from Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Cuba's involvement in Africa started with its support for Algeria's liberation struggle, and then moved to the Congo, and followed on to Ethiopia, Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, and South Africa. You have to remember how determined the French were to defeat the Algerians. They saw Algeria as a province, not deserving of a liberation. Now, again, the question for me that raises an incredible amount of admiration for the Cubans as a people is, why would people who are so far away from us see merit in our cause and come to our assistance? Algeria is free. The Congo is free today. Ethiopia stands as a free country. And similarly with Guinea-Bissau, Angola, Mozambique, Namibia, and South Africa. In his 1998 speech to the South African Parliament, President Castro said that by the end of the Cold War, at least 381,432 Cuban soldiers and officers had been on duty and fought hand in hand with African soldiers and officers in the continent for national independence or against foreign aggression. And yet they asked for nothing. Nothing in return. They didn't ask for a mine. They didn't ask for oil wells. They didn't ask for money. They did it because of their fundamental belief in a common humanity and fundamentally in human rights, without picking and choosing. Long after the fact, President Castro himself revealed the role Cuba played in Southern Africa. Commemorating the 30th anniversary of its Angolan engagement, Castro recalled the thousands of Cuban soldiers that had defended Angola against the 1975 South African invasion, as well as the Cuban soldiers that had come to the assistance of Angola, of the Angolan armed forces in 1987 and 88. Now, this for me is what was a turning point in the continent and might have probably even contributed to events in Europe. The shock to the P3 of the defeat of South Africa by the Cubans and Angolans at Cuito-Cuaneval changed everything for us. Up until then, South Africa, apartheid South Africa was considered as indomitable. It was well armed to the teeth by Israel, the United States of America. Israel supplied the wherewithal to build the nuclear weapons that we have, that were intended to be used in the theater on the continent. It never occurred to them that somewhere, somehow, strategically, they could be outmaneuvered and find themselves, sadly, carrying bodies back home. And when that started happening, mothers back in South Africa started asking questions. What are we fighting for? What is happening? The defeat, definitively, of apartheid, militarily, on the field, shocked America to the core and opened up the path for many things to come. Namibia became free. We followed afterwards. But it did something else also. It proved the nonsensical argument of nuclear weapons, the possession of nuclear weapons for deterrent purposes. Where in Africa do you use nuclear weapons on a small scale, particularly to kill people who are fighting for human rights? This seemed a logical argument to the P3. South Africa needed to have nuclear weapons to fight terrorists. And that myth was broken by the defeat of apartheid at Cuito-Cuaneval. This is what then catalyzes things that culminate in the release of Nelson Mandela. At that time, our children were more or less at war. Our state was at war with children. And this admiration they have of Castro is that he was the only one that was fighting the apartheid government at the same time that it was shooting children in the streets and killing them. While the United States of America said, no, 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 give them a chance. Maybe we can live with gradual change. You cannot have Africans given the vote. They're not well educated enough. While you have France and the UK also, no, you cannot concede. You need safeguards. These Africans will mess up. They'll destroy the country and all of that and all of that and all of that. So when you match the two, the battle in Angola and the children who are facing the apartheid state in the townships, day in and day out, some are disappearing, some disappeared, we still haven't found them up to now. This to us is the true embodiment of internationalism. We are free today because of the decisions that were made by Castro. We owe our freedom. This is in the consciousness of South Africans, all of us, that we owe as men and women, parliamentarians, business people, those that are in cabinet. Had it not been for this event that happened, I would still be in exile. We'd still be handing out leaflets, calling for the boycott of apartheid and all of that. Ambassador, I've tried to summarize what I had. I realize this is a panel discussion. I want to end up with a quote from Fidel Castro in 1953 on trial when he says, condemn me, it is of no importance. History will absolve him. There was no need for absolution. We honor him. I thank you.
I thank you very much, Ambassador Ziegler, for his very important remarks. And now I'm pleased to invite His Excellency Ambassador Jorge Valero of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. Ambassador Valero has a rich career as a diplomatic, academic, university professor, writer of numerous books. He has represented his country with dignity in diverse range of organizations, such as the United Nations in New York, the OAS, and Par Latino, just to mention a few. He was also Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs, and he's a firm defender of multilateralism and friend. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Ambassador de Cuba, Pedro Pedrosa, mi querido amigo, Ambassador of South Africa, Nosipko Joyce Makato Diseko, Excellencies, dear friends. El pasado sábado 7 de diciembre se cumplieron 30 años de aquel histórico acto Cagual 1989, cuando el comandante eterno de la Revolución Cubana, Fidel Castro, inmortalizó a los héroes internacionalistas de su país que ofrendaron sus vidas cumpliendo misiones humanitarias en el exterior.
On last Saturday, 7 December, it was 30 years of that historical act of Cajahual in 1989 when the eternal commander of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, immortalized the international heroes of his country that offered their lives, fulfilling the humanitarian missions abroad.
El patriotismo y el internacionalismo fueron reivindicados por Fidel como dos de los más hermosos valores atesorados por el ser humano.
Patriotism and internationalism were reivindicated by Fidel as two of the most treasured and beautiful values of the human being.
Cuando observamos los procesos de la humanidad, constatamos que existen hechos históricos que están labrados como petroglifos sobre rocas metamórficas que ni el tiempo ni nadie puede borrar.
When we see the process of humanity, we can tell that there are historical facts that are set in stone in metamorphic rocks that not even time nor people can make them go away.
El pueblo cubano y su revolución a lo largo de la historia, y a pesar de las limitaciones impuestas por el imperialismo yanqui, ha dado permanentes demostraciones de solidaridad en diversas latitudes del orbe.
The Cuban people and its revolution throughout its history, and despite the limitations imposed on them by the Yankee imperialism, have given permanent demonstrations of solidarity on all latitudes around the world.
Inquebrantable la gesta emprendida por Fidel contra el colonialismo y el proceso de recolonización que las potencias imperiales llevan adelante con el propósito de dominar el universo.
It is unbreakable what Fidel started against colonialism and the recolonizational process of the imperial powers that carry out the purpose of dominating the universe.
El capitalismo salvaje, con su economía de rapiña, sus antivalores y sus métodos hegemónicos, pretende impedir que los pueblos alcancen su soberanía, su independencia y su felicidad.
The savage capitalism, with its economy, its lack of values, its hegemonic methods, aim to impede that the people reach their sovereignty, independence, and their happiness.
Pero los pueblos del mundo son irreverentes. Los pueblos no pueden seguir siendo instrumentos de las potencias capitalistas para que perpetúen sus desmedidas e inhumanas ansias de riqueza y de poder.
But the peoples of the world are irreverent. The peoples cannot continue being tools of the capitalist powers to perpetuate their inhumane willingness for wealth and power.
Los pueblos despiertan del letargo a que han sido sometidos por las potencias imperiales y como un huracán humano emprenden nuevas luchas libertarias.
The peoples waken from their long sleep that they have been subject to by the imperial powers as a human hurricane, and they start their libertary fights.
Afirma Fidel, y cito, que la revolución no se puede importar ni exportar. Un Estado socialista no se puede fundar por inseminación artificial o simple trasplante de embriones. La revolución necesita las condiciones propicias para ello en el seno de la propia sociedad y solo cada pueblo puede ser su propio creador.
Fidel affirmed, and I quote, "The revolution cannot be imported nor exported. A socialist state cannot be founded by artificial insemination or a simple transplant of embryons. The revolution needs the conditions to be adequate for it and to come from within its own society so that every people can be their own creator."
El imperialismo y sus pretensiones por sobrevivir se propone recolonizar a los países en desarrollo. Por eso vivimos un mundo donde se han restablecido oprobiosas prácticas fascistas. El imperio y sus pretensiones hegemónicas se cree dueño del mundo, restituye las ambiciones de Hitler de dominar el mundo.
Imperialism and its pretensions of surviving that aims to recolonize the developing countries. This is why we live in a world where these terrible practices have been taken out, these fascist practices. The empire and its ambitions, its hegemonic ambitions that to deem themselves the king of the world, and goes back to the ambitions of Hitler of dominating the world.
A lo largo de 60 años de historia, Cuba ha logrado resistir el bloqueo económico y las más difíciles prácticas de asedio a que ha sido sometida por el imperio. Hoy podemos decir que Cuba y su revolución han salido victoriosas.
Throughout 60 years, the heroic Cuba has managed to withstand the economic blockage and the most difficult practices of harassment that it has been subject to by the empire. Today, we can say that Cuba and its revolution has come out successful of this.
Y esto ha sido logrado porque el comandante de la Revolución cubana, Fidel Castro, sembró un sentido de amor patrio en la conciencia de cada cubano.
And this has been managed because the commander of the Cuban Revolution, Fidel Castro, set a seed of love for the homeland within the consciousness of each Cuban.
Fidel entendió que el pueblo es el sujeto fundamental de todo proceso de transformación, que la emancipación no será posible de alcanzar si en su conciencia no se arraiga el sentimiento patrio.
Fidel understood that the people is the fundamental subject of every transformation process, that emancipation would not be possible if in their consciousness it was not set their homeland.
Inconmensurable es el legado de Fidel. Su prédica política siempre estuvo guiada por un profundo sentimiento humanista, humanismo que el enciclopedismo no logró definir a plenitud y que fue desnaturalizado por el liberalismo capitalista.
The legacy of Fidel is unmeasurable. His political legacy was always guided by a deep feeling of humanism. Humanism that encyclopedism was not managed to define fully and that was denaturalized by capitalist liberalism.
Humanismo es la manera como Cuba se relaciona con los demás pueblos del mundo. Solidaridad, cooperación, fraternidad, principios que han guiado a la Revolución cubana.
Humanism is the way as Cuba relates itself with the rest of the peoples of the world, through solidarity, cooperation, brotherhood, the principles that have guided the Cuban Revolution.
Cooperación solidaria que se expresa en la presencia de técnicos, médicos, educadores, de miles de ellos, en decenas de países del universo.
A solidary cooperation that is expressed through the presence of technicians, physicians, and teachers from Cuba in dozens of countries around the world.
En la instalación de la sexta conferencia cumbre del Movimiento de Países No Alineados, celebrada en La Habana, Cuba, Fidel se preguntaba, ¿qué se le puede impugnar a Cuba? ¿Que es un país socialista? Sí, somos un país socialista, pero a nadie, ni dentro ni fuera del movimiento, pretendemos imponer nuestra ideología y nuestro sistema. Y no tenemos nada de qué avergonzarnos por ser socialistas. ¿Que hicimos una revolución radical en Cuba? Sí, somos revolucionarios radicales, pero no pretendemos imponer a nadie, y mucho menos al movimiento de países no alineados, nuestro radicalismo.
In the beginning of the sixth summit of the non-aligned movement held in La Habana, Cuba, Fidel asked himself, what can be assigned to Cuba? That it's a socialist country? Yes, we are a socialist country, but no one within or outside of the movement do we try to impose our ideology and our system. And we do not have anything to be ashamed of for being socialist. That we did a radical revolution in Cuba. Yes, we're revolutionaries. We're radical revolutionaries, but we do not aim to impose it on anybody, least of all on the non-aligned movement, least of all our radicalism. End of quote.
Y agregó Fidel, somos decididamente antiimperialistas, anticolonialistas, antineocolonialistas, antirracistas, antisionistas, antifascistas, porque esos principios forman parte de nuestra concepción y están en la esencia, el origen y la vida y la historia del movimiento de países no alineados desde su fundación.
And Fidel added, and I quote, we are decidedly anti-imperialist, anti-colonialist, anti-neocolonialist, anti-racist, anti-Zionist, anti-fascist, because these are the principles that are part of our convictions, that are within our essence, the origin of life and the history of the non-aligned movement since its beginning.
Fidel se preguntaba igualmente, ¿qué es la historia de Cuba sino la historia de América Latina? ¿Y qué es la historia de América Latina sino la historia de Asia, África y Oceanía?
Fidel also asked himself, what is the history of Cuba if not the history of Latin America? What is the history of Latin America if not the history of Asia, Africa, and Oceania?
Al triunfar la revolución en Cuba, América Latina se encontraba totalmente bajo la hegemonía del imperialismo estadounidense. La revolución cubana fue la precursora de una nueva era histórica. Amplias perspectivas de liberación se abrieron para millones de humildes y desposeídos en su lucha por terminar con la opresión.
The triumph of the Cuban Revolution in Latin America, when a Latin America that was completely under the hegemony of the United States imperialism, the Cuban Revolution was the leader of the new history. Vast perspectives of liberation that opens for millions of humbles in its struggle to end their oppression.
América Latina y el Caribe es una región que ha sido expoliada de sus recursos naturales y sometida al genocidio de sus poblaciones desde la época colonial. Después de las guerras de independencia y hasta ahora, se ha impuesto el neocolonialismo que mantiene principalmente a través de gobiernos tutelados que responden a los intereses del imperialismo.
Latin America and the Caribbean is a region that has been deprived of its natural resources and subject to genocide of its population since the colonial times. After the wars of independence and until now, neocolonialism has been imposed, and it maintains mainly through the governments that are led and answer to the interest of imperialism.
La unidad y la integración de nuestra América son elementos fundamentales de la visión estratégica del líder de la Revolución Cubana que vivió en el legado de José Martí y Simón Bolívar.
The unity and integration of our America are fundamental elements in the strategic vision of the leader of the Cuban Revolution that drank from the legacy of José Martí and Simón Bolívar.
Para Fidel, la integración latinoamericana y caribeña tiene un alcance multidimensional. Es una interacción entre procesos políticos, sociales y culturales de los pueblos.
For Fidel, the Latin American and Caribbean integration has a multidimensional reach. It's an interaction between the political, social, and cultural processes of our peoples.
Relevantes son los logros que Cuba y Fidel impulsaron en América Latina en los campos de la salud, el deporte y la educación.
The achievements that Cuba and Fidel fostered in Latin America are very relevant, specifically in the fields of health, sport, and education.
El internacionalismo de la Revolución Cubana ha devenido en una práctica constante de solidaridad y cooperación como nunca se ha visto en el mundo.
The international aspect of the Cuban Revolution has become a constant practice of solidarity and cooperation as never before seen in the world.
En el año 2002, los comandantes Fidel Castro y Hugo Chávez dieron impulso inicial a la Alianza Bolivariana para los Pueblos de Nuestra América ALBA, que promueve un proceso de integración alternativo a los esquemas existentes en la región.
In 2002, commanders Fidel Castro and Hugo Chavez fostered the initiative of the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of Our America, ALBA, that promotes an alternative integration process to those existing in the region.
Durante el gobierno del comandante Chávez, Fidel viajó a Venezuela en 11 ocasiones, incontables veces que el líder de la Revolución Bolivariana visitó a Fidel en La Habana.
During the government of Commander Chavez, Fidel traveled to Venezuela 11 times, and numerous times the leader of the Bolivarian Revolution visited Fidel in La Habana.
Un histórico y fuerte abrazo se dieron Hugo Chávez y Fidel Castro el 13 de diciembre de 1944 en el Aeropuerto Internacional José Martí de La Habana. Se dio así inicio a una estrecha relación de amistad que marcó una nueva era revolucionaria para el continente norteamericano y el mundo.
It was a historical and strong hug that was given by Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro on December 13, 1994, in the International Airport of José Martí in Havana. It was then that the beginning of a very close relationship of friendship that set a new revolutionary era for the Latin American continent and the world as a whole.
Ahora quisiera recordar las palabras de Hugo Chávez con ocasión de celebrarse el 80 cumpleaños de Fidel en agosto de 2006. Y cito: Fidel es un gran detector de problemas, como un matemático, un Pitágoras social. Él es un gran matemático social para solucionar los problemas de los pueblos. Creo que de tantas cosas que admiro a Fidel, de esos 80 años de inmensidad, esa es una de las que más admiro y trato de imitarlo. Fidel puede ser como un padre más allá de las dimensiones humanas, más allá de las dimensiones de los formatos, y yo pudiera pensar que él me ve como a mí, como si fuera su propio hijo.
Now I would like to remember the words of Hugo Chavez when it was Fidel's 80th birthday on August 2006, and I would like to quote him. Fidel is a great detector of problems, like a mathematician, like a Pythagoras, a social Pythagoras. He's a great mathematician, a social mathematician, to solve problems, the problems of the people. I believe that of the many, many things that I admire of Fidel in these 80 years of immensity, one of the things that I admire the most, and I try to imitate him, is this. Fidel can be like a father beyond human dimensions, beyond the dimensions of formats. I wish, and I could think of him that he sees me as if I were his own child. End of quote.
Hugo Chávez fue recibido en Cuba por el presidente Fidel Castro con los honores que se le brindan a un jefe de Estado. Apoteósico recibimiento que los venezolanos agradeceremos por siempre.
Hugo Chavez was welcomed in Cuba by Fidel Castro with all the honors that are provided to a head of state. A great welcome that us Venezuelans will forever be thankful for.
Hugo Chávez y Fidel Castro se hermanaron en sus sueños libertarios. Ahí están esos dos gladiadores, dos Quijotes que nos guían para que nos mantengamos indoblegables en la lucha por la liberación de nuestros pueblos.
Hugo Chavez and Fidel Castro became brothers in libertarian dreams. There they are, those two gladiators, those two Quixotes that guide us to keep us straight in the struggle for freedom of our peoples.
Cuba y Venezuela son hoy para el mundo lo que fuera en su tiempo el faro y la biblioteca de Alejandría para el Oriente y Occidente.
Cuba and Venezuela are today for the world what it was in that time, the lighting and the Library of Alexandria to West and East.
Y es que la relación entre la revolución cubana y bolivariana no es circunstancial, es una relación duradera que se sustenta en los principios políticos, económicos y sociales compartidos, cada uno de acuerdo con su propia realidad. ¡Viva Fidel! Hasta la victoria siempre. Muchas gracias.
And it's the relation between the revolution of Cuba and the Bolivarian Revolution that it's not a circumstantial relationship. It's a long-lasting relationship that is based on political, economic, and social shared principles, each of them in accordance to its own reality. Long live Fidel, to victory forever. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Valero. Thank you. And now I'm very pleased to invite Mr. Guy Mettan. Guy Mettan is a journalist, politician, and writer of numerous books. Former director and editor-in-chief of the main Geneva newspaper, Tribune de Genève. He was member of the Parliament of Geneva since 2001, and in 2010, a Speaker of Parliament. Mr. Mettan is currently Executive Director of the Geneva Press Club and had the privilege to meet Fidel during his visit to Geneva in 1998. He just came back from a visit from Cuba. You have the floor, Mr. Mettan.
Thank you, Excellencies. I wish to thank Pedro Pedroso, Ambassador Pedroso, for giving me this opportunity to remember the visit of Fidel Castro here in Geneva. But I wish also to thank Ambassador Di Secco and Ambassador Valero for their speeches, because they just mentioned the important historical and political role of Fidel Castro for southern countries, especially in Africa and Latin America. I am speaking from the western side of the world, and as you know, in the western world, Fidel Castro is often depicted, often presented as the figure of the bad, figure of the evil. He's a communist, he's a bad guy, but thanks to your testimony, we we had the opportunity to see, what was in reality Fidel Castro, not as he was often described in our media or by our political establishment. I just wanted to give, I will not speak about politics because it has been already done, but just try to give some anecdotes about his visit here, to give, for me, what was the human being Fidel Castro, not only the politician, the thinker, and yes, but the revolutionary, but also as a human being. I first visited Cuba in 1978. I was a student at the University of Geneva, and I was sent to Cuba for representing the Geneva students at the World Youth Festival in Cuba in the summer 78. I was not a journalist, I was only a student, but I tried already to get an interview with Fidel. So I went to the Centro de Prensa and fulfilled a formula, an application form to make an interview. But, as a single student, I had no chance. There were hundreds of journalists there, so no chance to get him. But what happens 20 years later? I became a journalist. I became a chief editor and director of the Tribune de Genève. And in the 90s, the beginning of the 90s, during especially the difficult times in Cuba because the collapse of Soviet Union and difficult economic times, we went to Cuba to prepare a special issue about Cuban arts. We visited and meet intellectuals and artists there. And with my colleague at the time of the Tribune, we decided to make TV emissions, a TV music emission at the Cuban TV. So we went to discuss with the boss of the TV at the time, Mr. Enrique Roman. And thanks to, we make the first joint venture between Cuban television and a Western capitalist newspaper, mine, Tribune de Genève. And we did 7 musicals at TV Rebelde, the second channel, during the 90s. So I got many friends there, the boss of the TV, some people of the government. And in 98, in January, I visited Cuba for, I don't know, many times, so maybe 7 times, and for covering the visit of the Pope. And I was interviewed by the Cuban television, and I got a strabism, at the time, since I was a child. And a Cuban ophthalmologist saw me at the TV, and he told to his relatives, but this guy, I could operate him, because it's a pity he has a strabism. So I could do it. And by chance, I was interviewing Aleida Guevara, the daughter of Che Guevara, and with some friends who noticed ophthalmologists. And I told them, I was very impressed by Aleida Guevara. And I told her, she's a good, tough woman, strong. He's a medical doctor, pediatrist. And so a good experience. And the friends told me, but we have a relative of us. She saw you at the TV. She could operate your eyes. So I was in the good shape, as all the time in Cuba. And we decided to visit her. And she looked at me and she told, yes, I could do it. No problem. I come back. And 10 days later, I met this guy here. He was at the WHO, and he told me, you go often to Cuba. We tried to invite Fidel for the 50th anniversary of the World Health Organization, but we had no answer. We tried to get some answer from Cuba. So I called my friends there, and your predecessor, I don't remember his name, ambassador of Cuba, called me back and so, yeah, you have a chance, maybe we'll come. You have to send this letter. So we wrote together the letter to invite Fidel. And after 3 weeks later, the Cuban ambassador told me, oh, Guido, I have a good news for you. The Comandante viene in Geneva. And he will do his press conference with you. That's the photo there. So, 2 months, the photo with the rose there. Yes. So after 2 months, it was in February or late February, Fidel came to Geneva for visiting WHO and also get an official visit to the Swiss Federal Council in Bern. And he was here just in the house. This room was not built. We did the press conference there. And as he didn't give a lot of interviews during the past years, lots of journalists, full of journalists, the room completely full. And as you know, Fidel was a good speaker, not only a good kind of genius of the language, you know. And he likes to answer questions not in 2 seconds, but in 20 minutes by questions. So, for me, we were both at the table, you know. And for me, so many people with so many questions. So I think after 10 hours, we are still there. And after 2 hours, I took his arm. And I said, be shorter, please. And once, second time, third time. And at the third time, he told me, but who is the dictator here, you or me? So, that was the kind of humor of this, of Fidel. So it was everything. Everybody was laughing like you know. So we finally put an end to this press conference after 2-3 hours. And when he went back, I went with him to his car, and he asked me, but why you don't come to Cuba? And I told him, but I was to Cuba 3 months ago for covering your meeting with the Pope. And suddenly I remembered the ophthalmologist, you know, and I told to Fidel, but maybe I could come again. I can come back again to be operated of my eyes. So he told me, but why? You have a good medicine in Switzerland. I said, yes, but I don't trust the Swiss medicine because anymore, because I was operated twice of my eyes without success. So he was laughing. And 3 hours later, he sent me the car, your car maybe, with some bottles of rum, a box of Cohiba, and an official invitation to go back to Cuba to be operated of my eyes. And I did it in July, same year, at the Sierra Garcia, with the doctor. I met this doctor last week in La Habana. She is now 83 years old, but she operates still now many children. So I got operated by Elena at the hospital Sierra Garcia, and I paid because I don't want it to profit, but I accepted the invitation and I was invited to the Laguito. You know, it's the residence of the official ministers and heads of states in Cuba, so I was like a head of state, so very happy with my wife to be there. And just the day after my operation, Fidel called at the phone. And you know the server, the maid, he was like, oh, it's Fidel for you. So I took the phone. He was asking me if everything was okay, if I was happy. And so was the story, you know. And said that's my 2 encounters with Fidel, so I will never forget that, you know. And it was successful because after 1 week, I went back and everything was okay. So, and now, after 20 years later, I just visited Cuba last week. I met the medical doctor, and she's, yes, still in good shape. And so that was my adventures in the Fidel Castro's Cuba. So, but it gives a human face of a kind of a myth, legendary person, and I think he was also that kind of human being. Yeah.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you very much for that very lively memory of your relationship with Fidel and also with Cuba. And now, dear friends, colleague, my fellow ambassadors, with this, I open the floor. If anybody from the public want to make any remark or any question to the, I recognize my brother, the ambassador of Barbados. You have the floor, Chad.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good evening to all of you. I'll be very brief. I really want to commend Cuba and all the panelists here for having such an event. Barbados, sure, if needed, my
If needed.
Okay.
Thank you. No, I was simply saying it's an honor to be here this afternoon. To be here on the 60th anniversary of the revolution is very important. And for Barbados, the relationship and love that we have for Cuba is very, very strong. And the role that Fidel Castro played in his lifetime in support of Barbados and the support that we have given to Cuba, long may it continue. But more importantly, when you think of what he stood for in the face of adversity, the reality of today, in the current global climate, we ought to take a lot of his wisdom and apply it into the 2019-2020 reality. They're not necessarily the same battles they fought, but there's a new kind of colonialism taking place. We see it every day. We see it here in this city. And whether it be economic, whether it be diplomatic, we have to use the knowledge that he would have imparted when he was here strategically to ensure that our interests as sovereign states are not undermined. And that is a clear message that has to be sent. And I think that your country, Cuba, continues to provide sound leadership in issues of non-intervention, human rights, and ensuring that all countries have a voice. And certainly I can tell you, many Barbadians continue to benefit from the healthcare that you offer in terms of eyes, many Barbadians. And believe it or not, I have relatives as well who have personally benefited from that program that you have. So for me, I'm not just saying it as a diplomat and as my country's ambassador, but as a person who in my younger years used to follow the likes of Che Guevara when I was in university. Don't let the suit and tie fool you, you know? And lastly, every year Barbados celebrates, well not celebrates, but pays homage to, many of you obviously would know about the Cubana crash that happened in Bridgetown's Barbados' waters. And there's a monument on our west coast in Barbados where every year the Cuban ambassador to Barbados and our government takes the time out to reflect on that tragic event. So I want to commend Cuba once again, the panelists, South Africa, my brother from Venezuela, and your stories just now. I never met him, but I felt as if I was living through vicariously through your speech. And I really want to say thank you very much for this event. For me, this is more than just a diplomatic evening. This is something personal. And I thank you very much. And long may the spirit of the Comandante live.
Thank you, Ambassador. I recognize my brother also, the Ambassador of Guyana.
Ambassador of Angola. There's the ambassador.
And then, okay, I will take,
I'll write down for you.
please. After Guyana, Ambassador of Angola, Ambassador of Nicaragua, and China.
Thank you, Ambassador Pedrosa and colleague ambassadors and colleague journalists. Let me start perhaps first in my official capacity and say that I want to thank Cuba and the Comandante for the leadership and the role that they have provided, very much so for the Caribbean, but of course for the world, because we know that not only the Caribbean peoples, but the peoples from all over the globe have benefited from the example of Cuba. And medicine has been mentioned tonight, and that is a very important area, probably the most significant. And I say I'm speaking from my role for a minute because I want to say thank you very much for the fact that our current president, President David Granger, has visited Cuba within probably 4 or 5 times within the last 2 years to receive medical treatment for his own cancer. And he is right now recovering and doing very well in Guyana and continuing as the president. But I want to move really away from my position as ambassador here. And I want to say to you that I have admired and embraced Fidel my entire life. And if it is one time in my life that the police manhandled me and pushed me and pulled me down, was one night in Guyana in 1969 when Fidel was visiting. And I could not get into the Prime Minister's compound to get close enough, as close as I wanted to hail Fidel. And I decided that I had to get there. And I went through what in Guyana we call a pale-in, which is a fence of the compound. And I got behind where Fidel was sitting, and I shouted out to Fidel. And he turned around, and he looked at this person that was insisting that I had to say, "Fidel, thank you." And what was I thanking him for? I was thanking him for the dignity that he gave to Caribbean people. The dignity that translates into the statement that we make, and to whom some of our leaders lost their lives and sacrificed immensely by saying, "We're in nobody's backyard." And that is what Fidel gave to us. We could stand up on our own. We could be proud citizens of our country. And Fidel said, "We're in nobody's backyard." And we had other leaders who went down the same road and said they were in nobody's backyard too, and were sacrificed. So I want to thank Fidel, because there's something else that we say in the Caribbean. We say, those who have the least give the most. And Cuba has also demonstrated this. They have given the most in terms of all the scholarships of students from all the countries that have gone to Cuba over all the years and benefited from what Cuba was able to give. Wherever you go in the Caribbean today, you go to Belize, you go to Guyana, it is a Cuban doctor, very likely, that will probably be treating you, because they came to us. They also received us. And if it's not a Cuban doctor that's treating you, it's a Cuban-trained doctor that is treating you. So I want to stand here really as a Guyanese tonight and say to you that the example and the contribution of Cuba to the Caribbean and to the world, and Fidel's leadership in that endeavor, is immense. And we thank you immensely for that, and Fidel immensely for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Reid, my brother. I recognize the Ambassador of Angola.
I don't think I can speak while seated. It's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ambassador Pedrosa. I'd like to take this opportunity to commend all the panelists. I want to second everything Ambassador Di Secco said regarding the relations between Cuba and Africa, particularly with Angola. The battle she mentioned of Quito-Cuanavale. Quito-Cuanavale is a region in Angola, and everything Ambassador Di Secco said about that battle is true, but there is still a lot more to be said. I think that Angola, Cuba, South Africa, and other countries of Southern Africa can organize something regarding that battle, so everybody interested could know more about Quito-Cuanavale. I want to also to say that I was lucky enough to meet President Fidel Castro in a lot of NAM summits in Zimbabwe, in Colombia, Cuba. President Fidel Castro also in Angola once, at least I was there, and I'm very happy because of that. The history of Cuba in some way is also the history of Angola. There is no way talking about Cuba without mentioning the importance that Cuba has in the liberation of Angola. For that, Angola will be forever grateful to Cuba. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I take your words that we should organize something on Quito-Cuanavale. I will tell you that. Thank you very much for the initiative. I recognize Ambassador Carlos from Nicaragua. And after is Ambassador of China, and now recognize Ambassador of Uruguay and Panama. Is also the back.
Well, thank you very much, my dear friend, Ambassador Pedroso, for organizing this amazing event, and thanks your amazing team that I know that make a big effort for this event and this organization that remember us the immortality of a friend, of a brother, Fidel Castro Ruz. I would like to thank as well the extraordinary interventions of our panelists present here. And personally, I have to say, Excellencies, it's always a honor to hear you and to learn from you. And now I would like to say some words in Spanish, and my very good friend David here is going to translate it to French, if you allow me, please. En estos momentos donde nuestra América Latina enfrenta nuevamente la agresión descarada imperial,
en ces jours d'aujourd'hui où notre continent d'Amérique latine affronte une attaque impérialiste totalement hors cadre,
la imagen, el discurso y el ejemplo de Fidel se vuelve, además de necesario, invaluable y solidario.
L'image du commandant Fidel, son discours et sa façon de faire sont aujourd'hui incalculables.
La heroica gesta de los padres de las revoluciones latinoamericanas nos pasa ahora la antorcha de la paz y de las transformaciones humanistas.
Le feu qui a été une fois allumé par nos antécesseurs et nos héros sont aujourd'hui dans nos mains et nous serviront pour continuer la lutte que l'on mène aujourd'hui.
Transformaciones humanistas que son dignas de nuestros pueblos y que Fidel en algún momento de la historia latinoamericana nos ha recordado al mundo que nuestros pueblos son libres y soberanos.
Ce sont des transformations humanistes qui nous font souvenir ou nous rappeler qu'aujourd'hui, nous devons continuer ce chemin.
¿Dónde? Este movimiento, nacido en Cuba, significó para los pueblos de nuestra América la verdadera búsqueda de la libertad de nuestros pueblos, como lo fue para Nicaragua el triunfo de la revolución sandinista.
Ce mouvement né à Cuba a signifié pour les peuples de notre Amérique la recherche pour la liberté de nos peuples, comme l'a été celui du Nicaragua, mon pays, qui a revendiqué la révolution sandiniste.
Finalizo simplemente diciendo que hoy Fidel, desde la inmortalidad, nos recuerda de nuevo y nos enseña de nuevo que nuestra lucha no tiene otro destino más que la victoria, porque hasta la victoria siempre. ¡Viva Fidel!
Gracias, embajador. El embajador de China tiene la palabra. Ambassador from China.
Yeah. Thank you, Ambassador. Thank you, Excellencies. Fidel Castro is a great friend and great comrade of China, of the Chinese people, and of the Chinese Communist Party. So I'm very honored here to participate in this panel to remember his cause and to remember the huge value he left us. Just now, the panelists had mentioned made a very important and very good point. It's about real revolutionarism. Real revolutionarism is for the freedom of the people, is for the national dignity, and also for the social and economic development of the country. But as the speakers rightly put it, real revolutionarism is not about imposing anything to other countries and other people. It is, on the contrary, it is about contribute to the global cause of the common interest and common future of humankind. And in this regard, I think Fidel Castro had left very important legacy on promoting internationalism and multilateralism, especially for multilateralism, given the current challenges we face, the new international situations. I think it is highly needed and necessary for us to remember the legacy of Fidel Castro, and as well as the people of Cuba and many countries for this purpose, especially for our generation and the generations to come, on how to further preserve, promote, and enhance multilateralism in Geneva and in the rest of the world. So this is some points I'd like to make. Perhaps we don't have sufficient time for us to elaborate these very important points, but I do believe that we should bear in mind the cause of Fidel Castro and continue his course for our generation. Thank you.
Thank you to also, Ambassador. I reconozco al embajador Cancela, embajador de Uruguay ante la OMC. Tiene la palabra.
Muchas gracias, Pedro. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Uruguay and Cuba have excellent relations. They have excellent relations, and we cooperate very closely in many fields. But if you allow me, I would like to add
a personal note. Perhaps one of the more beautiful emotions that we humans can have is hope. And you know, when I think in Fidel Castro, I evoke a wave of hope that crossed along all Latin America at the end of the 50s, in the 60s. And this is something I want to bring here today because I think it's one of the more beautiful things we have. This enormous sensation of hope we had across the continent by a movement, by a revolution that was personified by him, and that, you know, makes certain for millions of Latin Americans that it was possible to change, that change is possible, that it's possible to change the world for better, for a better life. So I think this is an important legacy we have. Well, that was simply that. I wanted just to add here to our discussion. Thanks.
Con certeza, embajador. Fidel dijo una vez, Fidel said once, a better world is possible. That has to do with your comment just now. Ahora le paso la palabra a mi hermano, el embajador de Panamá, embajador César.
Buenas noches a todos. Good night to all of you, sir. Our president of the Grupo de los No Alineados, el distinguido embajador de Azerbaiyán, está aquí con nosotros. Miren, hemos tenido unas reuniones con el tema, perdónenme, me salga un poquito, pero es que estoy pensando si expreso en inglés las ideas, pero hemos estado en unas reuniones por la defensa del español. Todos los países latinoamericanos, y el embajador Valero estuvo en la última reunión conmigo, sabe a qué me refiero, entonces tengo una presión muy fuerte. I have a strong pressure because we have in a group, Ambassador Valero and myself and some other ambassadors, to protect and respect the use of the Spanish in this community. So voy a usar los dos idiomas y es para que nuestra distinguida embajadora de Sudáfrica pueda también entender el mensaje. Gracias, hermano. Panamá y Cuba han sido dos países. Cuba and Panama, we are two countries that we are brothers. Nosotros somos hermanos. Tenemos muchas similitudes. We have a lot of similarities, very, very similarities in our history, en nuestra historia, especialmente en la relación esta en nuestras independencias, en nuestra relación con los Estados Unidos. Hay una similitud muy fuerte ahí. Pero eso es el pasado. Nuestro país sostuvo una lucha generacional. Our country has a strong generational fight to get back the canal, para que el canal volviera a nosotros, regresara a nosotros. Y Fidel, nunca se nos olvidara, en cada discurso, cada vez que tomaba la palabra, no importaba qué evento fuera, nadie se lo había pedido, lo primero que pedía era, el bloqueo cubano tiene que liberarse. Y segundo, devuélvanle el canal a los panameños. Donde iba, lo repetía, nadie le tenía que pedir ese favor. Y en ese momento, que ahora nuestro país está casualmente, vamos a celebrar ahora los 30 años y acabamos de celebrar el aniversario de la firma de los tratados del 7 de septiembre. Se firmaron el 7 de septiembre del 77 y entró en vigencia el 1 de octubre de 1979. O sea, este 1 de octubre conmemoramos y en diciembre del 99 a las 12 del día nos los dieron de vuelta, así que este año también vamos a celebrar en diciembre. Y de ahí la persona que liderizó eso, the person that was the leader to get back the canal, fue el general Omar Torrijos, que el partido que él fundó acaba de ganar las elecciones y está de nuevo en el gobierno. Y eso me ha hecho recordar de nuevo esta historia de relaciones con los hermanos cubanos. Nuestro país, y aquí, bueno, todo el mundo ha hablado ya de las experiencias de ellos y son muy similares a las nuestras. Nuestros pueblos indígenas, y eso es algo, estimado y distinguido embajador Pedroso, que nuestro país siempre les apreciará. Nuestros pueblos indígenas, todos los médicos de nuestros pueblos indígenas fueron formados en La Habana, en la Escuela Panamericana de Medicina. Todos los médicos, gratis, totalmente gratis. Y ahí podríamos contar muchas anécdotas. Tenemos similitudes en la música. Nosotros expresamos nuestra historia a través de la música, los cubanos también. Tenemos muchas cosas similares. Nuestros poetas, nuestros autores, la cucarachita mandinga. Esto es otra anécdota. Cuando uno va a La Habana y te hablan de la cucarachita, ustedes la llaman de otra manera. Martina, bueno, la cucarachita mandinga es un autor panameño, pero los cubanos dicen que es cubano. Y eso es otra de las disputas históricas en la poesía que existe. Y una anécdota personal, yo estudié en un colegio jesuita, fui formado por los jesuitas en Panamá, por el colegio Javier. En el año 77 terminé mi formación con los jesuitas. Toda mi vida, estuve 12 años allí. Y yo, mis padres que venían de estratos muy humildes, mi papá quería que yo estudiara, que fuera artes y oficios, porque había que aprender a usar las manos y habría que aprender a reparar cosas. Después tuve que hacerlo de todas maneras. Pero mi madre quería que yo fuera jesuita. ¿Y ustedes saben por qué? Porque mi mamá, cuando era soltera, fue al primer encuentro de juventudes latinoamericanas que se hizo en La Habana después del triunfo de la Revolución, y era la única mujer en la delegación de Panamá. Y en la casa nos criaron cuando hay una foto donde está mi mamá, está Fidel, y está el Che, y está Camilo, y está todo el combo y la delegación panameña detrás. Como ella era la única mujer, entonces mi mamá me dijo, tú vas a ser jesuita porque a Fidel lo formaron los jesuitas. Eso quedará en la historia. Yo creo que más allá de una ideología política, la grandeza de Fidel, él dijo una vez que la historia lo juzgará. Yo creo que la historia lo valorará hoy en día, y entre más pase el tiempo, más se irá valorando ese mensaje de solidaridad que el pueblo cubano le transmite al resto de los países, no solo de América Latina y el Caribe, a los países del mundo entero. Ustedes nos han enseñado a ser solidarios, y como dijo muy bien aquí un distinguido, en las buenas y en las malas y sin tener de dónde, ustedes se quitan los zapatos y se lo dan al que lo necesita. Y eso es humanismo en la práctica de verdad. Eso no lo hace todo el mundo. Yo les quiero dar las gracias hoy, Pedro, a ustedes y a Fidel, que nos escuche donde se encuentre en su espíritu en este momento, para que el mundo pueda seguir adelante. Porque si no aprendemos a querernos y a respetarnos, no importa que tengamos ideas diferentes en un momento dado, pero pensando en el bien común, el mundo se va a ir al traste hoy. Gracias por todo.
Gracias, César. Bueno, para evitar correr el riesgo de que me acusen de que socavo el español, tú me traduces. Quiero darle las más profundas gracias a nombre de todo el equipo de la Misión de Cuba, a los panelistas, por haber aceptado esta invitación para conmemorar el tercer aniversario de la desaparición de Fidel, pero más que todo para celebrar su gran y magnífico legado para nuestro pueblo y para los pueblos del mundo. También quiero agradecer profundamente a mis colegas embajadores, que los veo que sé cuántas, porque las comparto con ustedes, cuán múltiple es el programa y las actividades que tenemos acá en Ginebra. Pero el hecho de que hayan dedicado parte de su tiempo para acompañarnos en esta conmemoración, lo apreciamos tremendamente. Por tanto, muchísimas gracias por su presencia, muchísimas gracias por las observaciones, por los comentarios que han aportado. Muchísimas gracias a los compatriotas, a los miembros de la comunidad cubana residente en Ginebra que nos acompañan, a los amigos de la Asociación de Solidaridad, de la Asociación de Amistad Suiza Cuba, a los amigos de la prensa que también están presentes, a los amigos latinoamericanos, en fin, nuestros más profundos agradecimientos a todos, y ahora los invito a que disfruten y continuemos compartiendo del lado allá de la sala en un modesto brindis. A la traductora también, muchísimas gracias. Que no traduzca.
So in order not to be judged for not speaking Spanish, I will let myself be interpreted. So first and foremost, I would like to thank all the panelists here present, as well as all my fellow ambassadors, who I know that despite their agendas that are quite full this time in Geneva, have managed to make the time to be here present with us. I would also like to thank all of the organizations here present, as well as the press that have always supported Cuba, and to thank you all on behalf of the Cuban mission. And now I invite you to some refreshments that are on the back. Thank you very much.